I'm working on this bottom finishing tape. At first I didn't think 3-inch tape would work on that, but I had cut off a little piece of 3-inch tape and I was checking it and it worked fine. And then I thought, well, these seaplane grommets on here are going to complicate it a little bit and I have to cut out around those. And I thought, well, maybe if I just took this and just run this tape right up to those seaplane grommets and then let it overlap on the other side farther, that would solve the problem. But then I was wondering whether that give me enough overlap over these seams or not here. I decided that it didn't, but now that I'm looking at it again, I think that it does. I have to rethink this again. Think it and rethink it. Meanwhile, I've cut a piece of 3-inch tape and I run a line down the center line of it, and I ran a line down the center line of this tube here so I can line them up together. If I decided, now if I lay this down on the center line, this tape is going to go past those seaplane grommets. The opening in those, I'm going to have to do something about cutting out around those. Screw it, I think I'm going to do it that way. That actually gives me a pretty good overlap. 3/4 of an inch overlap over the ends of these tapes, because all of it, like this reinforcing tape, ends back here a little bit farther, but then the finishing tape over the top of that overlaps it. So I think I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good like that. So, okay, that's what we're going to do. The first thing to do here is just go ahead and lay out some poly brush along this line and let it set up just like we do it for all the rest of the tapes. I've got the edge tapes on both end ribs, the finishing tape on both end ribs on the number 2 horizontal stabilizer. Whereas before I was making the mistake of putting too much poly brush on there, I kind of went the other direction and put a little too little poly brush on that one when I did those. I didn't put the bedding layer of poly brush down. You put one layer down and let it cure, and then put the second layer down and bed the tape into it. Well, I just put a layer down and bedded the tape into it, and that winds up being a little too dry. I was able to salvage it and make it work, go from one extreme to the other. I've got that horizontal stabilizer all prepped up, and it's ready now to put the seaplane grommets in it. This first horizontal stabilizer, I've got it set. I've got the bottom tape on, the tape on the rear spar. I got that all on there and all leveled out, trued up and everything. I wound up having to take a little bit of reducer to go on over it to get some of the excess poly brush off of it. Now I've been working on doing this leading edge tape, and I didn't think that, I wasn't sure whether a 4-inch tape would work or not, but I put a 4-inch tape up there and measured it out, and I figured out that I can make it work, and I can actually overhang it more on the lower side and less on the top side on the, of it, and that'll work fine. So I've run a line down the spine of it, the center line of it, of the tube, and marked it, and now I've got my 4-inch tape. Well, I went and got some 4-inch bias tape because I didn't know whether I could, you know, this would shape here because of this curve. It's going to kind of want to pill up or ball up, whatever, here on the folds, and I wasn't sure about heat shaping that, so I got some bias tape, and that'll work, but it kind of makes it, as you pull it to go around there, even though this is not a very aggressive curve, it still reduces the width of it. Oh, I'm going to try to experiment on this. I've got it marked out here with a line on all sides and down the center line. I'm going to go ahead and try it with this regular 4-inch tape, and I think I'm just going to put a little bit of poly brush on there down the center line and glue this all down the center line, and then try to shape it with iron. Well, it's all set up. I've got my first coat of poly brush on there already. So I'll just take and run another, just a narrow coat of poly brush. What happens here on these rounded edges is you wind up getting too much polybrush. It runs over from this side and runs over from this side. When you glue it down in the center and then try to, or one side or the other, then when you can either get not enough in here around here, or you wind up getting too much in down here on these curves, on these rounded edges. So I'm going to glue this down on this center line on the curve here first, and then I'm going to try to shape it to either side. And I've taken this piece of tape here and marked it, and I'm going to draw a line on it, and that's where the center line is going to be. And it's not on center, it's off, like I said, because this lower side is going to hang over farther than the top side will. Because I've got to cover up this seam. This is the seam between the one top side and the bottom side here. That's what makes this the bottom side, is that seam's right here. I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but that's what I'm going to try. And this is the bias tape here. You can see it's only like 7 feet long or something like that, and then they stitch it together, and you can't use where it's stitched in there on that, but when you pull this, see that can form around the corners, but it also shrinks up the distance or the width of it when you do that. The 4-inch tape is all glued down with polybrush down the spine, the outside radius of that rib. Well, I'm going to set it aside now and let all that cure, and then I'm going to try to heat form it and see if I can get it to heat form around there. See if I wasted my money on that bias tape or not. Probably brush has had time to set up here on this horizontal stabilizer now. I'm going to go ahead and see how this works. Alright, it's kind of working, kind of not working. I've got it set at about 225 here. I didn't want to shrink this fabric, I just wanted to form it. See how much it'll work if I just keep working it. It's getting around the corner, but it's still not taking the puckers out of it. So I'm going to have to turn the iron up a little bit and shrink it a little bit, I guess. Okay, that's not working either. About 300 degrees, and it's working pretty good now. Still getting some wrinkles in it that I can iron out. Kind of. I'm trying to keep the iron here on this outside edge more as much as possible so that it shrinks this outside edge more than the inside edge. That's going to work on this side. That gives me enough space over my seam there to cover it fine. Also kind of glued it down to the poly brush underneath, which I didn't necessarily want to do yet. Okay, that's going to work. We'll spin it over, flip it over and do the other side and see how much it shrinks, if it shrinks the other side too much. Okay, that's going to work. I'm still within my lines that I drew on there. Alright, I got that glued up on there. I'm going to set it up now and let it cure, dry overnight. It's got a few little bumps and stuff in it that should come out with the iron. That turned out not so bad on that leading edge. I had to use the iron at about 300 degrees to shrink down some of the little blisters and stuff that formed in that, but it formed real nice. That's a 4-inch tape, so I kind of wasted my money getting the bias tape. The 4-inch tape worked fine. I got plenty of coverage over the seam here on the bottom, and plenty of coverage on the top here. And like I said, on it I had quite a few little blisters sticking up and stuff on that, and they just ironed down real nice. I got one little spot in here where I might have had the iron on just a little too long, and it shrunk just a little bit. Well, actually, maybe that's just because that goes over this doubled section of this tubing where the link tube goes through there. It may have just pulled out because of that, because that tubing is thicker there. Well, otherwise, it all looks real good. I was kind of worried about it at first after I got done, because like I said, I had a bunch of blisters and stuff in there, and but they all went down real nice. So I'll clean that up a little bit with some reducer to get the excess that came out through the fabric when I ironed it, and get that off of there. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with that. I got to figure out what to do, how to tuck the ends over. This inside edge is no problem. I just have to cut this off flush with the end of the tube so that the link tube can fit through there. This end down here, we've got to figure out some way to end that, and I might just cut that off flush on that end because I've got good coverage on this end. This first horizontal stabilizer is all finished through the paint, through the brush. Still have to take, just like the door, take a poly brush and spray a coat poly brush over it, and then do the poly spray, and of course do the finish color. But I've got all of the tapes on, all the edges ironed down, everything's all in good shape. It's all trimmed up and ready to hang up out of the way. The second horizontal stabilizer, I got the grommets on those last night. I'll go ahead and start setting those up to put the two tapes on the front and rear spars now.